The cost of buying versus renting a home is a hot topic that comes up all the time with polarizing opinions on which makes the most financial sense. When it comes to renting, your yearly costs basically just come down to the amount of monthly rent over 12 months, plus any other costs associated with utilities that aren't covered by the landlord. So if your rent is $1,200 a month and utilities average $75 a month, well, you're looking at $15,300 over the year in housing costs, of which 100% is gone for good. On the other hand, owning a home comes with quite a few more expenses to account for, including your mortgage payment, insurance, property taxes, utilities, maintenance costs, and so forth, which can really add up and make the total cost of homeownership more expensive than many initially planned for. While I have frequently advocated the long-term financial benefits of homeownership, I am still not blind to the evolving market dynamics influenced by rising interest rates, which have made the discussion more intricate than it used to be. This complexity is compounded by the fact that housing costs have surged to unprecedented levels, with average rents doubling in most cities as home prices have held steady in the face of these surging interest rates. Ultimately, the optimal choice between purchasing and renting a home hinges on a multitude of factors specific to your individual circumstances. These factors encompass your geographic location, your income, financial objectives, and more, all of which coalesce into the total cost of homeownership over a defined period. And before delving deeper into this discussion, I want to emphasize that if your total cost of renting does prove to be more economical than buying a home and it aligns with your desired lifestyle, then there is nothing wrong with choosing to rent until you are prepared to embark on homeownership, should you ever even choose to do so. Alright, so the costs of renting are quite straightforward, but we would then need to delve a little bit deeper into what constitutes the costs of owning a home, which are mainly broken into 4 categories. So let's first cover the smallest and most straightforward expenses, starting with property maintenance, which will of course differ from property to property, but as a rule of thumb, budgeting roughly 1 to 2% of the property's value per year is what's considered to be standard. So on, say, a $500,000 home, that would be anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 a year in maintenance costs to account for. Now, yes, this value will definitely fluctuate from year to year and will also depend on factors such as the age of the home and its care over the years, which could mean maintenance will be more or less than the target 1 or 2%. And in my experience owning an older house for 3 years now and quite a few multifamily rental properties, I'd say maintenance in the 1% range or less even is more common, especially for years where, there aren't any capital improvements like the roof, HVAC units, new kitchen renos, and so on, which can shoot up the maintenance costs significantly. Next up on the list of home expenses to account for, we have property taxes, which will fluctuate from municipality to municipality and the value of the property in question. But on average, yearly property tax will hover between 0.5% and 2.5% of the home's value. And so while not 100% accurate, because you'd have to know the exact yearly tax rate for the property that you're considering, we'll take an average here of 1.25% across the country, which would mean that for a home valued at $500,000, the yearly tax bill would amount to $6,250. From here, we also have to consider insurance premiums for the property, which will greatly differ depending on the property in question, year it was built, and a multitude of other factors. But based on the data I could find in Canada, the average yearly insurance premium hovers around $916 annually, so $76 per month. By the way though, and for the record, the insurance on my home is quite a bit more than this. And finally, we can now explore the most important monthly cost associated with a property for most homeowners, which is the monthly mortgage payment. Here's the thing, most prospective homebuyers aren't going out and buying all cash, so they'll be taking out a mortgage loan on the property, generally between 5 and 20% of the property's value. And I say generally here because 20% is the standard down payment typically used to purchase a property, while insured mortgage loans can allow new homeowners to put as little as 5% down in Canada and 3.5% down in the United States, making it essentially more accessible, but monthly financing costs do increase the lower the down payment. For the sake of this example though, we'll consider a traditional 20% down payment, meaning that on a $500,000 home, you'd be looking at putting $100,000 down and then taking out a $400,000 mortgage. Now, in order to come up with a value representing the long-term cost associated with buying a home, we need to consider what the interest that we're paying on the loan, as well as the opportunity cost associated with locking up $100,000 in a property that therefore can't be used to invest elsewhere, which could be creating further income and appreciation. This is one factor contributing to the cost of capital, and the general idea here is that the money spent on a down payment could be invested in, say, the stock market, earning dividend income and appreciating over time. Now, on average, home prices in Canada have appreciated by 1.9% yearly from 1982 to 2023. On the other hand, the S&P 500 has appreciated by an average of 10.15% per year from 1957 to 2022, meaning that from a strict return percentage standpoint, simply investing in the broad American stock market would outperform the average annual growth of Canadian real estate by 8.25% or $8,250 on the $100,000 down payment, which of course makes this seem like an easy choice. By the way, you can easily find annual real estate growth values for your country online, so if you're not from Canada, you shouldn't have any trouble finding your country's figures. Now, the thing is, the values we just highlighted don't give a full picture though of the true cost of capital, because when investing in the stock market, you're generally only earning a return on capital that you have invested. Whereas with a home, the leverage that the mortgage loan is providing you multiplies return on investment figures, but we'll get back to this shortly. So to fully figure out the cost of capital though, the second aspect is that we also need to consider the costs associated with the interest payments on the mortgage loan. Because let's remember, the portion allocated to interest on your mortgage payment is money that you'll never be seeing again. So it's costs associated with owning a home. Back to our $500,000 home example, with a $400,000 loan, considering current interest rates at 5.5% for a 5-year fixed loan, this means that you're paying roughly $22,000 in interest over the first year if you opted for a 25-year amortization period. All right, so let's now tally up all of these yearly costs associated with owning a home that you won't be getting back. We have the maintenance at roughly $5,000 a year, the taxes at roughly $6,250 per year, the insurance premium at $916, the mortgage interest at $22,000 in the year, and then the down payment's opportunity cost of $8,250 for a total of $42,416 per year. And when dividing that figure by the value of the home, in this case $500,000, we're left with a value of 8.48% yearly, which can be used to loosely compare the cost of ownership versus renting. For example, if you're able to rent a home of equal size and value in the same area for less than the monthly cost of ownership here that we just calculated for the $500,000 home at $3,534 per month, well, then renting could be a better option for you. Of course, though, every market will present a vastly different portrait of whether renting makes more sense over buying and vice versa. If you're in a market where you can rent a beautiful 3-bedroom flat or home, let's say for $2,000 a month, and anything similar would cost $3,000 a month to own, excluding taking appreciation and debt pay down into account, then renting could very well seem like the better option. It's going to depend on the circumstances specific to you. The problem with this quick comparison method though is that there are many variables and factors that are simply not taken into account. The first one is the fact that in the past scenario, the down payment's opportunity cost represented over $8,000 a year, which was a large chunk of our total cost. And in a perfect world, yes, stocks do tend to outperform property appreciation on a yearly basis, but that's certainly not always the case. And regardless, this would mean that the individual in this scenario would need to perfectly invest that $100,000 at all time and stay invested to reap the full benefits of this opportunity in the first place, rather than, say, spend that liquid capital on anything else, which can be very tempting to do. And history has shown us that humans have a very hard time actually sticking to consistently investing, whereas a down payment locks that money in and the mortgage serves as a forced savings account every month as equity is built, even if rates are relatively high right now. The second variable has to do with the appreciation of the property's value over time. That's leveraged by the mortgage loan and amplifies the return on the down payment. So while average yearly gains have only been 1.9% on real estate in Canada, which doesn't seem like much compared to the double digits of the stock market, well, that 1.9% is on the total $500,000 home rather than only the $100,000 investment. So this means that yearly appreciation on the $500,000 home would be $9,500 or 9.5% return on the $100,000 down that you put out of pocket, which immediately starts to sound a lot better. Now, of course, this appreciation is only collected upon the sale of the property, which might be in 10, 20 years. So from a month-to-month cash flow standpoint, you're not touching upon these benefits, but for a full assessment of whether owning or renting makes more sense for you long-term, this is absolutely something that needs to be considered in your equation. Okay, now I know what you're thinking. Property price points right now, though, have dropped from all-time highs. And so for people who bought at the very top, they've actually lost equity on the home, which is absolutely accurate. But if held long enough, property does tend to appreciate in most markets over time. But yes, the purchase price and individual financial circumstances of each homeowner will be unique. So it's therefore difficult to provide blanket statements in this case. And finally, in parallel to what we just spoke about, the appreciation on primary residence in Canada is completely tax-free, which again, in the macro long-term assessment of owning a home is a large element to consider, as all capital gains are exempt from taxes on primary residences. So while 100% of your rent payments are gone forever, with owning a home, although monthly costs can often exceed renting in the short term, that is true, it's in the long term that it can often be advantageous to own, because your cost associated with the mortgage debt decreases every single year that you own the property, while all the appreciation is also growing tax-free. And hey, if you're in the US, you also get to deduct mortgage interest on your primary residences from your taxable income each year, which can also greatly reduce your taxes owing. So as you can see, there are a lot of factors and variables to consider when comparing renting versus buying, which is why I'd encourage you to really sit down and do a proper assessment based on your area and your financials. Let's now cover the main pros of owning a home, starting with building equity. So as you make those mortgage payments, you're gradually building equity in the home, and over time, this equity can be tapped into for various financial needs, such as home improvements, educational expenses, or retirement if you choose to do so. And by the way, even though rates are relatively high right now compared to where they were a year or two ago, nothing says that, when rates lower once again in a couple of years, hopefully and potentially, you can't refinance the property at a much lower interest rate. That's something to consider as well. Now, the second pro is stability and control. So homeownership provides stability by allowing you to establish roots in your community that, renting generally doesn't offer the same level. You have more control over your living space as well, which means you can customize it and, decorate it to your liking. Tax benefits are another pro here, where homeowners may benefit from tax deductions, including deductions on mortgage interest and property taxes if you're in the US, and these deductions can lower your overall tax liability. Now, pro number 4, appreciation. So historically, real estate tends to appreciate in value over the long term. Again, if you're going to be keeping your property for 3-5 years, unless you're doing major renovations and forcing the appreciation of the property artificially yourself, then it can be difficult to actually make a return in the shorter term on a home. However, it's really over the long term of owning a home, as you can ride through different market cycles and the value of brick and mortar investments increasing over time, that it can be worthwhile. And let's now cover some of the pros of renting, as there certainly are many. So the first one being flexibility, right? Renting offers more flexibility and mobility, making it easier to make a move when necessary. It's also an ideal choice for those who aren't necessarily sure about their long-term location or have changing circumstances like job relocations. Second pro here, lower initial costs, where renting typically involves lower upfront costs compared to buying a home, which often does require a substantial down payment, comes with closing costs and ongoing expenses that we just spoke about. Third pro here, maintenance and repair. So as a renter, you're not responsible for major maintenance and repair costs. Landlords are usually responsible for addressing issues such as plumbing, electrical, structural repairs, and so on. Just as an example here, the other day my furnace at home broke. I spent many hours dealing with the gas company and repairmen coming to the house, right? This is not something that you deal with as a tenant to the same degree, and you don't pay for any of those repairs. Pro number 4 here, no property taxes. Property taxes are usually the responsibility of the homeowner, the property owner. So as the renter, you're exempt from this financial expense. The property tax payments can be significant as well, and you're only responsible for making your rental payments in a timely manner each and every month. The landlord takes care of all the other expenses on the property. So I really hope this video gave you some further insight into the considerations required when comparing owning versus renting a home, along with what to consider over time to determine what's most worthwhile for you. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. It's totally free. I post weekly on the channel speaking about personal finance and investing. So if that's for you, don't forget to subscribe. And hey, if you want to know how much home you can afford, make sure to check out this video right here. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.